and welcome to Strength Physiology Online. My name is Dr. Grant Ralston and I produced this free online sports science content to provide support for students. This is a bite-sized presentation that provides information on the development and history of exercise physiology. The history of exercise physiology represents a global perspective involving scientists from an array of different countries. In this presentation, I begin with the impact European scientists have had on the development of contemporary exercise physiology. In addition, there will be information that briefly discusses the role of the Harvard Fatigue Laboratory and the growth of exercise physiology in the USA, as well as other influences on the exercise physiology across the globe. So where do we start? Well, we're going to look at the European heritage of exercise physiology, and namely Hill, Krogh and Meerhof. A good starting place to discuss the development of exercise physiology is within Europe. There was three scientists, Hill, who originated from Britain, Krogh of Denmark and Meerhof of Germany, and they all received Nobel Peace Prizes or Nobel Prizes for research in muscle or muscular exercise. Hill and Meerhof shared the Nobel Peace Prize in Physiology in 1922. Hill was recognised for his precise measurements of heat production during muscle contractions and recovery, while Meerhof for his discovery of the correlation between the consumption of oxygen and the measurement of lactic acid in the muscle tissue. Hill was also highly skilled as a mathematician before becoming more interested in physiology. In addition to his work cited for the Nobel Prize, Hill's studies in humans also led to the advancement of a framework around which we understand the physiological factors relating to distance running performances. Krogh, however, he received his Nobel Prize for research on the function of capillary circulation, and he also had a major impact on other numerous areas of investigation or inquiry. Additionally, like many other researchers, his influence wasn't solely just by his own work, but by his students and other colleagues that he's collaborated with. Krogh's collaboration with Linhard resulted in classic studies that sort of dealt with carbohydrates and fat metabolisms during exercise and how the CV and respiratory system responses are controlled during exercise. When we're discussing about Krogh and his impact he had towards his students, Asmussen and Howie Christen and Nielsen, he sort of deemed them and called them the Three Musketeers. They had a major impact on exercise physiology research throughout the middle of the 20th century. These investigators, as you can see, in turn trained a number of outstanding physiologists, and these physiologists then in turn trained other physiologists, and then that's how we managed to grow this area of exercise physiology. The August Krogh Institute in Denmark contains some of the most prominent exercise physiology labs in the world. His wife, Marie Krogh, was a noted scientist in her own right and was recognised for her innovative work on measuring the diffusion capacity of the lungs. There's other leading scientists that also contributed. There's Haldane, Douglas and Nielsen. So several other European scientists must also be mentioned, not only because of their contribution to physiology of exercise, but because we actually use these names within discussions of exercise physiology. So Haldane, he did some original work on the role of carbon dioxide in the control of breathing. Haldane also developed a respiratory gas analyzer that bears his name. So when your lab is a sports scientist, you may have came across a Douglas bag. So C.J. Douglas, he originally did pioneering work with Haldane and the role of oxygen and lactic acid in the control of breathing during exercise, including some work conducted at various altitudes. The canvas and rubber gas collection bag has been used for many years in exercise physiology labs around the world, and it carries his name, the Douglas bag. A fellow contemporary of Douglas, Bohr of Denmark, also performed classical work on how oxygen binds to haemoglobin. The shift in the oxygen-haemoglobin dissociation curve due to the addition of carbon dioxide also bears his name. Interestingly, it was Krog who did the actual experiments that enabled Bohr to describe his famous shift. Moving on to the USA and the Harvard Fatigue Laboratory. So this was a focal point in history of exercise physiology in the US. Professor Henderson organised the lab within the business school to conduct physiological research on industrial hazards. Another prominent researcher was Dr. Dill. He was a research director from the time the laboratory opened in 1927 until it closed in 1947. These scientists conducted research in numerous areas, in the lab and in the field, and the results of those early studies have been supported by more recent investigation. Dill's classic text, Life, Heat and Altitude, is definitely recommended reading for any student of exercise and environmental physiology. Much of the careful and precise work of the labs was conducted using the now classic Halden analyzer for respiratory gas analysis and the Van Syke apparatus for blood gas analysis. So the active research areas in the Harvard Fatigue Lab, as you can see in the table, we're looking at metabolism, environmental physiology, clinical physiology, ageing, blood, and physical fitness. And within these subunits, what you'll actually see is what also was getting investigated in. Most importantly, when we're looking at basic physiological fitness tests, that's where the name the Harvard STEP test came from. So the Harvard Fatigue Lab attracted doctoral students as well as scientists from all over the globe. Many of the alumni from the lab are recognised in their own right for excellence in research in the physiology of exercise. There was actually two doctoral students, Stephen Hovarth and Sid Robinson, who went on to distinguished careers at the Institute of Environmental Stress in Santa Barbara and also the Indiana University. From fellows across the globe included the Three Musketeers we've already discussed, Amundsen, Christen and Nelson, and the Nobel Peace Prize winner, Krog. These scientists brought new ideas and technology to the lab, and they participated in the lab and field studies with other fellows, and published some of the most important work in physiology of exercise between the 30s and 1980s. Magaria from Italy went on to extend his classic work of oxygen debt and described the energetics of locomotion or movement. Skolander from Norway also gave us chemical gas analyzers that is the primary method of collaborating tank gas used to standardize electronic gas analyzers. It should be noted that under the leadership of Dr. Dill, the Harvard Fatigue Lab became a model for research investigations into exercise and environmental physiology, especially when it relates to humans. When the lab closed and the staff dispersed, their ideas, techniques and approaches to this scientific inquiry were distributed throughout the world, and with that, Dill's influence in the area of environmental and exercise physiology grew. Dr. Dill continued his research outside of Nevada until the 1980s. Another one we want to sort of talk about is physical fitness and health, and namely Dr. Sargent. So when we looked at the performance of humans, especially during the war, so concerns about physical fitness aren't really new. So we're looking at the obesity epidemic, the inactivity levels within our current society, but it's something that's not new. American researchers took an interest in physical fitness more than 100 years ago, as far back as the Civil War and the First World War. Physical education in the USA was primarily concerned with the development and maintenance of physical fitness, and many of the leaders in physical education were trained in medicine. For example, Sargent, he was hired by Harvard University in 1879, and he set up a physical training program with individual exercise prescription to improve a person's structure and function to achieve the prime physical condition called fitness for work. Fitness for work, fitness for play, fitness for anything a man may be called upon to do. Sargent was clearly ahead of his time in promoting health-related physical fitness. Later, war became a primary force driving the country's interest in physical fitness. Concerns about health and fitness were raised during the First and Second World War, when large number of draftees failed the physical induction exams due to mental and physical defects. That caused concerns and influenced the type of physical education programs within the school curriculum for many years, making them resemble pre-military training programs. Interestingly, whereas stunted growth and being underweight were major reasons for rejecting military recruits in World War II, obesity was still the major cause. This presents interest in physical activity and health, and this was further stimulated in the early 1950s by two major research findings. When they started to look at autopsies of young soldiers killed during the Korean War, it showed significant coronary heart disease had already been developed, and Hans Cross showed that American children performed poorly on a minimal muscular fitness test compared to European children. Due to that finding, President Eisenhower initiated a conference in 1955 that resulted in the formation of the President's Council of Youth Fitness. The American Association for Health, Physical Education and Recreation supported these activities, and in 1957 developed the AAHPER Youth Fitness Test, with national norms being used in physical education programs throughout the country. President Kennedy also expressed his concerns about the nation's fitness in an article published in Sports Illustrated called The Soft American. Within it, or during Kennedy's term, the council's name was changed to the President's Council of Physical Fitness to highlight the concerns for fitness. The name was changed again in the Nixon administration to the President's Council of Physical Fitness and Sports, which supported fitness not only in schools but in businesses, industry and for the general public. The name was also changed recently by President Obama to the President's Council of Fitness, Sports and Nutrition. This was to focus more attention on the obesity epidemic. Items in the youth fitness test were changed over the years, and in 1980, the American Alliance for Health, Physical Fitness, Recreation and Dance published a separate health-related physical fitness test manual to distinguish between performance testing and health/fitness testing. This battery of health-related tests is consistent with the direction of lifetime fitness programs, being concerned with obesity, cardiorespiratory fitness and low back function. This parallel fitness test was developed by the Cooper Institute in 1982, including software to support the scoring and the printing out of reports in which we could then measure. Paralleling this interest in the physical fitness of youth was the raising concerns about death rates for coronary heart disease in the middle-aged humans by looking at data from America, Australia and New Zealand. Epidemiological studies of the health status of these populations underscored the fact that degenerative diseases related to poor health habits and health choices, such as high diet fat, smoking and activity, were responsible for more deaths than the classic infectious and contagious diseases. In 1966, a major conference highlighted the need for more research in the area of physical activity and health. And by the 1970s, there was an increase in the use of exercise tests to diagnose heart disease and to aid in the prescription of exercise programs to improve cardiovascular health and functioning. The idea that regular physical activity is an important part of the health lifestyle was again rediscovered. And any questions remained about the importance of physical activity to health. In 1996, there was the Surgeon General's report, and the appearance of the first US physical activity guidelines in 2008 put to rest so this started to develop significant areas in which exercise physiology started to investigate. So the key matters that was investigated between 1954 and 1994 were selection of exercise, so looking at exercise specificity, the prescription of exercise as a preventative measure and a way to improve health, and also looking at the responses that exercise has on the disease population. Other ones that they started to look at was motor function of the spinal cord and the matching mechanisms for oxygen delivery and demand. Other areas of interest were the responses of muscle fibres with different and varying treatments. In 1981, the Australian Institute of Sport opened in Canberra. This was because it was promoted in part by the 1976 Montreal Olympics, where Australian teams failed to win a gold medal, leaving the nation embarrassed by this sporting low point. While that Australian Institute of Sport has influenced numerous athletes, coaches and sports, it's also been a major influence in exercise physiology in the region. Along with the associated state sport institutes and academy work, the Australian Institute of Sport has become regarded as a place that has driven sports science and really pushed it forward in Australia. It's associated with a number of world-renowned sports scientists who have trained many more and inspire many undergraduates to study in this area. There's prominent researchers such as Professor Chris Gore, who's become a world leader in athletics, especially looking at altitude training methods. And it is now the place in which researchers from around the world seek to collaborate. More recently, the use of exercise or physical activity has become increasingly important in preventing and assisting in the treatment of various chronic diseases. So this has just been a quick introduction to the importance of exercise physiology and these different sub-areas that we're starting to grow upon. I hope you've liked this introduction, and if you have, feel free to share, and thanks for watching.